Tonight we have new developments in the investigation into what caused the deadly offshore oil drilling disaster off the coast of Louisiana. We've learned something new about what led up to the explosion on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig that killed 11 people. These new developments are not just about what was happening in terms of engineering on board the oil platform. They're about a specific decision that may have led to the explosion, to those 11 people's deaths, and to the still escalating disaster we are facing right now in the Gulf. The Deepwater Horizon, as you know, is a drilling rig. It was actually wrapping up its operation at this site when it blew up. After drilling very deeply to the oil there, the Deepwater Horizon was on its way out. Its job was essentially done. Transocean, which owns the Deepwater Horizon rig, and BP, which was leasing it to get to the oil, they were in the process of temporarily capping the well that they had successfully drilled there. They were closing it up. Remember, these offshore oil rigs are mobile. They move around, which is why they're flagged like ships. Deepwater Horizon had finished its job of drilling the well at this site. All it still had to do was safely close off the well. So that well site would be ready for another production rig to come in and re-tap what the Deepwater Horizon had already drilled. And that second rig would actually extract the oil. That's what was going on the day of the explosion. Deepwater Horizon was due to sail away to drill somewhere else after safely closing up the well they'd drilled so somebody else could reopen it. But that is when the explosion happened, when they were in the process of temporarily closing it up after they had drilled it. Last night, in interviews with one of the last people to escape the rig and an engineer investigating the accident for the government, the news show 60 Minutes uncovered and explained a key decision about how to close up that well, a decision made by BP that may tell us why it blew up. Check this out.
Williams says that in a drilling accident 4 weeks before the explosion, the critical rubber gasket called an annular was damaged, and pieces of it started coming out of the well. Here's why that's so important. The annular is used to seal the well for pressure tests, and those tests determine whether dangerous gas is seeping in.
So if the annular is damaged, if I understand you correctly, you can't do the pressure tests in a reliable way.
That's correct. You may get pressure test recordings, but because you're leaking pressure, they're not reliable.
The morning of the disaster, according to Williams, there was an argument in front of all of the men on the shift between the Transocean manager and the BP manager. Do you know what that argument was about?
Yes.
What was it?
Who's boss?
In finishing the well, the plan was to have a subcontractor, Halliburton, place 3 concrete plugs, like corks, in the column. The Transocean manager wanted to do this with the column full of heavy drilling fluid, what drillers call mud, to keep the pressure down below contained. But the BP manager wanted to begin to remove the mud before the last plug was set. That would reduce the pressure controlling the well before the plugs were finished.
Why would BP want to do that?
It expedites the subsequent steps.
It's a matter of going faster.
Faster, sure.
Who won the argument?
BP.
If the mud had been left in the column, would there have been a blowout?
It doesn't look like it.
To do it BP's way, they had to be absolutely certain that the first 2 plugs were keeping the pressure down. That life or death test was done using the blowout preventer, which had the damaged gasket.
So in other words, BP pressured Transocean to plug the well less safely because it would make getting the oil out of the well go faster. Transocean, which is responsible for sealing up this well safely, said, we'd rather keep the drilling mud in there, but BP, which is paying the bills, won that argument with Transocean. BP got its way, and hours later, the plugging of the well failed, and the rig blew up, and 11 men died, and mass environmental disaster began. When asked to comment on the 60 Minutes report this morning, BP's Chief Operating Officer Doug Suttles told the CBS Early Show his focus is stopping the spill and that we should, quote, let the investigations finish up. If there was a market for blame in this disaster, nobody would be selling short in that market. There is plenty of blame to go around. The man in charge of overseeing offshore drilling programs at the already scandal-prone Minerals Management Service in the government has just announced his sudden retirement. He was in charge of the office from 1995 to 2007 before getting promoted. His, quote, retirement comes conveniently enough just days after President Obama promised to end the cozy relationship between the Minerals Management Service and the oil industry it supposedly regulates. Meanwhile, the Minerals Management Service declined to testify in front of the Senate Homeland Security Committee today. Declined to testify. The reason this is important is not because this is hindsight. This is not looking back. This is not trying to find the right lessons learned from a disaster that's in the past. Obviously, the oil is still gushing right this second, so the past isn't even past yet. But there's also the problem of what we've actually got still in the Gulf right now. What we've got right now is, for example, this. This is not an archival photo of the Deepwater Horizon rig before it exploded and sunk. This is now. This is Atlantis. This is 100 miles further offshore than Deepwater Horizon was. It is drilling in water that is more than 2,000 feet deeper than the water that Deepwater Horizon was drilling in. A former BP subcontractor turned whistleblower says BP never reviewed the final design documents for systems and equipment on the Atlantis rig, the photos of which we were just showing you. That means they never confirmed that the rig's equipment was actually built how it was supposed to be built. The whistleblower says Atlantis cannot operate safely without completed blueprints, something that we've seen in action on the Deepwater Horizon disaster. A disaster on Atlantis would presumably be even more gigantic than the Deepwater Horizon's disaster because it's drilling more oil further out and deeper. Today, the whistleblower from this rig, along with the consumer advocacy group Food and Water Watch, filed a lawsuit to get the Atlantis rig shut down until BP can prove it's safe. We'll keep you posted.